Hi everyone, welcome back. In this session we're going to be talking about influencers. So we've just talked about people who are direct and dominant. We'll be talking today about influencers. In the next session we're going to be talking about the stabilizer behaviour style. Then we're going to be covering off on the compliant, or those people who really love the techie detail. So influencers, they are big picture people. They love to understand the strategy. They don't necessarily love getting into the detail, and in fact details they can find quite boring and they can become a little bit impatient with details. But influencers are generally extroverted, and the kind of people that you might think about if you're thinking about an I style would be people like Oprah Winfrey, Liza Minnelli. They're both I styles. Robin Williams, again, he's a real people person. He's expressive, he's animated. And if you're looking at some people who are characters on TV shows, Game of Thrones, if you think about Robert Baratheon, Star Trek, we'd be thinking about Montgomery Scott, and then for Harry Potter, Ron Weasley. You might find that one of those characters or those celebrities actually resonate with you, and if you can get a picture of those people in your mind, you'll actually be able to lock in some of those behaviour traits as well, because you're associating it with a person. Maybe you're an I style yourself, or you know somebody, you're bound to know somebody who is an I style. So again, pretty talkative. They love to share stories, but they also love to listen to stories. They're very easily excited, and it might feel like they jump from subject to subject because they just want to know lots of stuff. There's always lots of stuff going on in their minds, and they might tend to ask questions several times, which for some people could be really annoying, but either they have forgotten that they've actually asked you that question already because they've got 100 things going on, or they maybe want to know a little bit more about it. So you'll find that these people, I think I might have already mentioned, they're extroverted, they're really open and friendly, they tend to talk a fair bit, and in terms of how they want to make you feel is if you walk into a room, they really want to make you feel very, very welcome. And for some people who are a little more introverted, it can be really a little bit overwhelming and seem a little bit over the top, but I can guarantee that more often than not, influencer behaviour types, they just want to embrace you. They want to make you feel as welcome as they possibly can. Now, influencers like to be liked, and they're very, very feelings-based people. They value connection. And so, you know, having that likability factor is really important to them, because they want to feel connected with you as much as they possibly can. And variety is important, and that's part of the reason that they likely go from subject to subject, or they seem to jump around a little bit, or they like lots of different things going on, because variety and adventure is quite important to them. In terms of some of that functional behaviour, you'll see that generally they're fairly optimistic and positive. They probably tend not to love being around people who are negative or pessimistic so much, because that will bring them down. If you're an I style yourself, optimism will only get you so far. You need to also be realistic, and because people that are I style are optimistic and positive, it doesn't mean that they're not realistic. They just very much see the glass as half full. In fact, they probably say, hey, that's a really good opportunity to put some gin or something else in that glass. So it's more than just a glass half full. They're generally fairly spontaneous. And again, that comes back to liking a bit of variety, but spontaneity goes with that as well. So they can kind of think, yeah, that looks like a great thing to do. I'm going to do that. So it might seem impulsive, but they love spontaneity. They might just decide, hey, let's go out for lunch, or let's catch up for coffee. We don't have to plan it 3 weeks in advance. Let's just do it. And for some people that could freak them out a little bit. Influencers, as the name suggests, they tend to be pretty influential and persuasive. They love to share their vision, and they love to tell a story, and they really want to take you on the journey. And for that reason, they tend to be fairly persuasive. If you're very much a facts-based person, sometimes influencers don't tend to go that deeply into the facts. It's not to say that they don't know the facts, but the important things to them are around the big picture and the strategy. There are some very dysfunctional traits in an influencer style of person, and often these dysfunctional traits will come out if they're not feeling good enough or not feeling like they're getting enough cut through. They might be feeling under stress or have quite some pressure going on for them at that time. And so some of the things that you might find if they're really under pressure is that they will have poor attention to detail. And if you're somebody who's more inclined to like the detail, don't just dismiss an influencer. Actually check in with them and find out what's going on and help them through the detail, because often they just might need that little bit of help. Sometimes they can become overly talkative. And you know, when you walk into a room and you might find somebody who is an I style and you're maybe a little bit less I, maybe you're less talkative, and they very much overcompensate for silence. So maybe they'll ask you a question, and while you're thinking about it, they start to become a little bit uncomfortable, so they just keep diving in with an answer or maybe another question. Again, be gentle with them and just ask them to be a little bit patient. Hang on a second, I'm just thinking about that. So do it kindly. They can be very emotional, and I was reading something the other day about an influencer who really wanted to get their point across, and they started crying, but they still got their point across. So those emotions can tend to bubble up, and it could be that whether it's anger or whether it's excitement or whether it's tears of happiness or sadness, you'll find that that can become a little bit dysfunctional if it's not in the right place that they do that. And sometimes for an I-style person, you really need to keep yourself together, depending on the situation that you're in. I-styles really are very eager to please, and for that reason, they might tend to overpromise. That is a really dysfunctional thing to do and a really unresourceful thing to do, because if you're overpromising and you can't deliver, then you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're also potentially setting somebody else up for failure. So be really mindful about what you're promising. And in any trusting relationship, the nice thing and the right thing to do is actually set realistic expectations. Another dysfunctional trait of an influencer is somebody who fails to follow up, and maybe they're stressed and they feel like they've got too much other stuff going on, and so they don't follow up with you. So if you're an I-style, remember to follow up, because it really is very important. If you've given a commitment to follow up, then make sure you do that follow up. Now, if you're managing an I-style, or maybe you're an I-style yourself and you want to look at how you can improve performance, suggestions here would be around talking less and listening more. For an I-style, it can be quite challenging to hold the space and not fill it with chatter. But if you do have those tendencies, when you ask somebody a question, just hold the space for them. Allow them to talk. Maybe get a little bit more curious, asking them questions rather than talk about the stuff that you're doing. So that will really help you in terms of your performance and your relationships with other people. Certainly don't overpromise and don't overreact to things. And when I talked about the D behaviour types, we talked about their tendency at times to react to things. And if you recall, we were talking about react is react. So you're doing the same thing that you've done before, and it's very quick and it's in the moment. So stop and have a little bit of a think about how you react and times that you react, and think about how you might better respond. And that might be just to hold the space for a moment, count to 3 or 5 seconds, let the information be absorbed, and then actually respond to it rather than that really super quick reaction. So yeah, a little bit of a tip there. Try and focus a little bit more, particularly at times when you do feel stressed and you do feel a bit jumpy. Try and focus in as much as you can on the thing that you're doing, and particularly when you're talking to people, make sure you look at them in the eye. Don't get distracted by people walking by or things happening around you. Take the moment and really be present in that moment. And again, there are times where you'll need to get into the details. So one way to improve your performance is to understand the detail where you need to understand it, because there'll be times that you're talking with people and they will want the detail. So you'll need to be able to deliver that. If you're in a space where you're across the table from an influencer style, think about some of those traits, because if you're there selling them a product or a service, or you want to convince them of something, try and really give some good regard to how they operate, because if you go in as a compliance style or a direct style and you're just right in there with the facts and you're nailing it, and they feel like there's no connection, that is going to be really challenging for them, because when people do business with you, they want to know, often, particularly if they're that I style, that there is a connection there. It really is so important. So make sure you've got that connection. Behaviour types tend to be automatic convincers. And what do I mean by that? So an automatic convincer is somebody who doesn't need to be convinced or given the fine details 3 or 4 times. If you've got something that you're selling to them, or something that's obviously going to solve a problem, if they know that it's going to solve their problem and they've got a connection to you, and even better, maybe it's something that's a little bit new in the market, they are going to want it. So don't be afraid when you're dealing with an influencer to actually ask them for the sale and close the deal straight away. Because if you don't, like the D style, somebody else will. They don't need for you to come back and wait, to follow them up in 2 days' time and then follow them up again. Try and really push yourself to ask them for that sale on the spot. And more often than not, you'll find that that'll tend to come off. So look, that's a bit more about the I style. I keep saying in each session, and I like to continue to say, because it's a really important thing to remember, is that each of the behavioural styles, only 1% of the population is purely that behavioural style, and everybody else has a combination of those styles. So keep that in mind. So as we're going through and we're talking about each of the styles, there'll be a combination. So there might be somebody who is like me, actually, who's an ID or a DI, and I think I told you earlier that I was kind of it was neck and neck in terms of whether I was a D or an I, so very high in both of those traits. So being direct is important, giving me the big picture is important, but connection is incredibly important to me as well. Keep that in mind. I'm going to finish up with that and leave you to think about how that might impact what you're doing and how you operate and how you connect with people. Next up, I'm going to be talking about stabilizers. So tune in to the next session. Look forward to seeing you there.